Welcome, everybody. Thank you. So my name is Leanna Levine-Reisner. I am the Network Director of Plant-Powered Metro New York. First, before we do all of our introductions, I just want to recognize that this webinar is sponsored by A Well-Fed World, which is an international hunger and relief organization and a food security organization advancing plant-based foods and farming to create a safe, nourished, and climate-friendly future. Our work at Plant-Powered Metro New York is about catalyzing a local health empowerment movement to make sure that people from all walks of life are aware of how powerful food can be in preventing and overcoming chronic illness, and specifically the tremendous evidence behind diets that emphasize largely unprocessed plant foods as our primary fuel. So this evening's program is presented in response to two very pressing issues in our communities today: lessons that we've painfully learned from COVID-19, as well as the ongoing quest for justice for people of color to address disparities in our healthcare system and in food and nutrition policy. We are really pleased to present tonight's program with a number of partners at the table, including Bronx House, a community center in the Morris Park neighborhood, which provides dynamic educational, health, recreational, and cultural programs. And I'm going to pass it over to Beth Helsner to share more about some of our partners.
Thank you so much, Leanna. All the sponsors of this program tonight are committed to health equity, and it's really an honor to be working in partnership with so many amazing programs to bring tonight's program together. I'm also really inspired by the scope of our audience tonight, so pleased to have so many of you joining us. It's just fantastic. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of information about our component organizations tonight, the ones that I'm most familiar with. The first being SUNY Downstate Health Sciences University, which has a long history of serving the central Brooklyn community as one of the nation's leading urban medical centers. We serve one of the most diverse populations in the world, and we're dedicated to the care and improvement of lives for our globally diverse communities. SUNY Downstate has a committee on plant-based nutrition, which is chaired by Dr. Rich Rosenfeld. And we've been working for the past couple of years to promote awareness of the health benefits of a plant-forward diet and to provide a forum for interdisciplinary action to integrate information about the benefits of plant-based nutrition into our training and education programs. As well as to get the good news out really to the community about the power of food when it comes to preventing and treating diseases. Our committee's grown consistently over the past several years with great support of the Office of the Brooklyn Borough President, Eric Adams, Downstate's College of Medicine, and our president, Dr. Wayne Riley. We're very, very grateful for that. I am a member of the faculty of another of tonight's sponsors, Downstate School of Public Health. As we know, the dual pandemic crises of racism and COVID-19 are some of the most serious public health issues we've ever faced. And Downstate School of Public Health has a unique focus on the health of urban and immigrant populations and a commitment to greater health equity for all. SUNY Downstate is also a member of, as is Plant-Powered Metro New York and the Brooklyn Borough President's Office, of the Central Brooklyn Diabetes Task Force, which was spearheaded by Minister John Williams. This task force is comprised of a coalition of medical and academic institutions, the New York City Department of Health, as I mentioned, the Borough President's Office for Brooklyn, and faith-based and community-based organizations. The Central Brooklyn Diabetes Task Force hosts community diabetes prevention conferences and health expos, and is dedicated to bringing community-based diabetes education and treatment to the people who need it most. And last, the Brooklyn Health Disparities Center reflects a partnership between SUNY Downstate, the Arthur Ashe Institute for Urban Health, and the Office of the Brooklyn Borough President. The center is committed to reducing health disparities in Brooklyn by increasing the level of engagement of academics, community members, and policymakers. The center provides amazing opportunities for training and professional development experiences, mentorship, community-based interventions, and research. And the center really focuses on recruiting and training underrepresented minority students, fellows, and junior faculty through the NIH Endowed Transport Program. So those are the community partners that I am the most familiar with. And now I would like to pass it over to Rachel Atchison from the Brooklyn Borough President's Office. Rachel.
Thank you so much, Beth. Thanks so much for having us on, especially to Plant Powered Metro New York for spearheading this and so many other events. My name is Rachel Atchison. I am the Deputy Strategist for Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams. For those who aren't familiar with his health journey, I'll give you the 30-second version, which is about 4 years ago, he was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And it was at such a severe stage that he was blind in his left eye, had tingling in his fingers and toes, and he sought the best medical help that there was out there. And they said that he would be on insulin for the rest of his life, and he just did not want to take that. So he indeed went to the Cleveland Clinic, saw Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, and started to eat a whole food plant-based diet and reversed his diabetes in the course of 3 months. Got his eyesight back, no more tingling in his fingers and toes, and really just revolutionized his life. So from there, about 4 years ago, he has made food policy a passion. And in that time, I came on board about 2 years ago. In that time, we've been able to implement Meatless Mondays in New York City public schools, hospitals, jails. We've also been able to really jumpstart the Bellevue Plant-Based Lifestyle Medicine program that Dr. Michelle McMacken leads. And right now, we are working on a larger food policy report. For those who are deep in the food world, by all means, please get in touch with me. I'm still in the draft phase of that report, so would love the community help. I know I'm sending it on to Leanna from Plant Powered. So for those who are interested, please get in touch. We just put out a statement about the Dietary Guidelines, which I know Dr. Mills testified at the same hearing that the borough president testified at back in August in DC. I know that Dr. Mills was talking about the kind of racism that is involved with dairy specifically. While we do not see much progress there, we're hoping that the Dietary Guidelines will eventually kind of admit this. Excited to hear more about that, Dr. Mills. So with that, we have a meetup coming up. It is using a different platform. It is using WebEx instead of Zoom. So just get ready for that. But that meetup is in partnership with Plant Powered Metro New York, and we'll be having cooking demos, et cetera, really showcasing Brooklyn chefs. So that is not this coming Monday, but the following, the first Monday of August. And we are looking forward to that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Straker.
Good evening, everyone. I am Pam Straker, and I'm the Director of Operations for Brooklyn Health Disparity Center. And I thank you all for joining us, and I am very happy to be a member of this team. I'm going to start this evening by giving some county statistics on the COVID pandemic. So here in New York City, in Kings County specifically, we've had 686,983 persons tested. 61,662 were positive as of yesterday. That's a percentage of 9.3%. And we are having today, or yesterday, I should say, there were over 8,000 people tested, and 94 people were found to be positive. So for those of you who know about the stats that have gone across the country, certainly this is a much better situation in which we find ourselves. I want to just focus on the fact that Brooklyn Health Disparity Center is really about looking at the research around health disparities, topics, issues, etc. And to that end, I'd like to share with you that Dr. Salafu, who is the director of the center, has an article that is out on the treatment targets. And so if you'd like to get that, please feel free to write us at www.bhdc. Oh, I'm sorry, but we're having We're having lots of weather here. It's www.bhdc.nyc. So anybody who's interested in getting further information on that research, kindly contact us there. And it gives me great pleasure now to introduce Dr. Mills. Needless to say, he's at the forefront of issues surrounding plant-based diet or lack thereof, particularly in communities of color. So Dr. Mills is a practicing critical care physician in the Metro Washington area, and that's Washington, D.C. area, and has served previously as Associate Director of Preventive Medicine and as a member of the National Advisory Board for Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, known as PCRM. He has been a major contributor to position papers presented by PCRM to the United States Department of Agriculture regarding dietary guidelines for Americans, and has been the lead plaintiff in PCRM's class action lawsuit that asks for warning labels on milk. Dr. Mills earned his medical degree at Stanford University School of Medicine and completed an internal medicine residency at Georgetown University Hospital. He has published several research journal articles dealing with racial bias in federal nutrition policy. He frequently donates his time by practicing at free medical clinics and travels widely, speaking at hospitals, churches, and community centers throughout the country. He was featured in the documentaries What the Health and The Invisible Vegan. Welcome, Dr. Mills.
And I can hear that you guys are having the same weather problems that we're having down here in DC, which is why I was somewhat delayed, and I apologize for that, but it's wonderful to be here.
Thanks so much, Dr. Mills. And we've got a lot of wonderful questions for you tonight, really trying to dig deep into two different areas, specifically COVID-19 and also the dietary guidelines, but also planning to zoom out and talk about bigger issues and structural racism that we find within food policy, health policy, nutrition policy elsewhere. But first, let's get started on COVID-19 in particular. You've been working in critical care since all of this has started. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it's like working in critical care and treating patients with COVID-19?
Wow. Yeah, let's say I hardly know where to start. What I can tell you is that here in the Washington, D.C. metro area, and specifically in Northern Virginia, fortunately, our cases have leveled off and started decreasing because 4 to 6 weeks ago, the hospital was essentially a COVID hospital. Almost all of our floors were taken up with COVID patients. And what is really, from a medical standpoint, unsettling and disturbing about this virus is that it makes people very sick very quickly. And one of the hallmarks of the disease is that there's so much on, and actually this is something that people should be aware of, is that a lot of the lung damage that COVID does is somewhat subjectively asymptomatic. In other words, individuals will often say that they don't feel short of breath, but when you look at them, they are clearly not oxygenating well. Their color is bad. And then when we check their oxygen saturation, it will be down in the 70s, 80s, or even sometimes lower. And in other words, these people are about to go into respiratory arrest, but they are somewhat unaware of it. Now, there are others who do have associated pain and discomfort and feelings of shortness of breath, but the sort of pertinent issue is that this virus causes a lot of asymptomatic lung damage. And the reason I'm emphasizing that is because there's a lot of discussion about people who are positive for the virus, but quote unquote asymptomatic. But what studies have shown is that when you actually do studies like x-rays and CAT scans of their lungs, you see evidence of significant damage that is taking place, but the people are unaware of it. And that's important because a lot of people are, still balking at doing the public health measures that are necessary to really put a lid on the transmission of this virus and to try and decrease its spread and prevalence. And, and they have this idea that, well, people are asymptomatic or they don't feel it. That should not be in any way any kind of a means of comfort, because people can sustain severe and significant lung and other end organ damage and just not be aware of it. And we're also finding that for many of the people who are technically recovering from the virus, they still have great difficulty with their exercise tolerance. Whereas before they could walk, miles or blocks without any symptoms, people find that simply walking a block or climbing a flight of stairs will sort of wipe them out and leave them feeling very fatigued and tired. So there is this virus is very serious. It causes a lot of damage and it causes some significant lingering effects. And it really, as a clinician, makes me angry when I hear people saying, "Oh, it's like the flu." No, it's not. It is the only things it really has in common with the flu is the fact that it can be transmitted through respiratory droplets and it primarily affects the lungs. Although we now know again that COVID affects all of the organs in the body, the heart, the intestines, the kidneys, and it can cause widespread blood clotting, and then it even causes some novel and really deleterious syndromes in children. So it is nothing to be dismissive of or to not take seriously, because this is a very serious illness, and we absolutely need to wear our masks, maintain social distancing, and avoid situations where there are large congregants of people, because this pandemic is still not properly controlled in the United States.
Thanks, Dr. Mills. Can you tell us a little bit, we've heard clearly in the news that Black and Brown communities have had higher rates of hospitalizations, higher rates of death compared to, their number in the population. Can you tell us from your perspective what you've learned about nutrition, lifestyle? What are your views on COVID disparities by race? What's driving those disparities? Tell us more about diet and other lifestyle factors.
Okay. Well, first, let me give you my opinion with respect to an overview of how our immune system works and why not only people of color are at higher risk, but why people in general eating a standard American diet are at higher risk. So our immune system is truly organized like a multi-level military operation. We have a number of different types of white blood cells that do different jobs based on where they're located and how they interact with the environment versus how they interact with our own system. So I want people to think of it like there's a country and it has a military. So it has an Air Force, a Navy, and an Army. And so if you look at that country and you see that it has, these various branches of its armed services, you'd say that country's in a good position to repel any invasion or fight off any in country that wants to, try and take over. And likewise, when you go to the doctor will draw blood, and part of your blood counts is they look at your white blood cell numbers. And if those numbers are within a normal range, they think, okay, this person is healthy. They're prepared to respond to any infection or serious health challenge. But just like this hypothetical country I mentioned, if you look more closely at that country's armed forces, you see that their soldiers have rifles that are missing firing pins and bullets. So even though they have rifles, the rifles don't work. They have an air force that has airplanes where the engines don't run. So those airplanes can't do what they're supposed to do. And the Navy has ships that can't sail. So although from the outside, it looks like they're prepared for an infection, the fact is that their military branches cannot do their jobs. Likewise, in order for our white blood cells to be able to fight off invaders, they need a number of dietary cofactors that, by and large, come from the plant foods that we eat. So there are a number of minerals. There are a number of vitamins and phytochemicals or plant-based chemicals that actually help our immune cells do what they need to do to kill invading viruses, fungi, bacteria. And when those cofactors are not present, although you have circulating white blood cells, they cannot do their jobs effectively. So if people are eating, things like fast food, cheeseburgers, fried chicken, and, sort of low nutrient, dense, high fat, high calorie foods, as long as they're not challenged by an infection, they may feel okay. But the minute they succumb very easily to the infection or invading organism because their white blood cells don't have the things that they need to respond appropriately. And as I said, those cofactors and nutrients are found primarily in the fresh plant foods that we should be eating. And if someone is not eating those foods, then they don't have what they need to mount an appropriate and sustained immune response. And that is one of the major reasons that people eating the standard American diet are so susceptible to illnesses like COVID. And I'll come back and address issues of people of color in a minute. But there are other reasons as well, and that is that animal protein and animal fat causes elevated levels of inflammation, which dampens down immune function, and they also directly interfere with the ability of immune cells to do their job. So again, it's kind of a two-hit phenomenon. In one respect, you are actually suppressing the activity of white blood cells by eating diets high in animal protein, animal fat, dairy products, and so forth. But then you also are not giving them the cofactors they need to actually get out and do their job in terms of responding to infectious agents and being able to sequester and kill those infectious agents. And so that's why studies, there have been several studies that have been done on people with COVID that have shown, for instance, that people who are low on minerals like zinc and selenium are more susceptible to having a severe course or succumbing to COVID. Plant-based nutrients like quercetin, which is an antioxidant flavonoid found in brightly colored fruits and vegetables, helps boost immune function, and people with higher levels of quercetin are more resistant to the virus. A major cofactor is what we commonly call vitamin D. I have a problem doing that because it's not a vitamin. It's actually a hormone. It's a hormone that we would make if we had adequate sun exposure, which most of us don't, because we are usually indoors. And even when we're outside, we're covered up with clothing. But many researchers now think that one of the primary reasons that colds and flu tend to peak during the fall and winter months and correspondingly decrease in spring and summer is because during spring and summer, people are outside, they are getting more sun exposure, so they are actually manufacturing higher levels of D3 so that their system is filled with this D3. That makes them very resistant to viral infections. But during the winter times, because again, of being indoors, being clothed, the D3 levels fall, and that makes us much more susceptible to viral infections because there's a D3 receptor in immune cells. So they need that hormone to do their jobs. And if you're not D3 replete, your immune cells are not going to be able to specifically respond to viral invasions. Another cofactor is it turns out that our microbiome in our colon breaks down plant fiber into a number of beneficial compounds that have an immune boosting effect and that are directly toxic to things like bacteria and fungi. Some of these compounds are called cathelicidins, and then there are other short chain fatty acids that are important. There are also receptors in our intestines that actually need compounds from cruciferous vegetables in order to actually bind to and then upregulate immune cell function. So again, by not eating this plant-based diet with these antioxidants, nutrients, and vitamins, and or getting adequate sun exposure, we basically have an immune system that will not work properly, and that predisposes us to becoming sicker or not being able to survive an infection like COVID. And then the issue with people of color is manifold. One of the major issues is, and let me, I'm going to see if I can bring up a slide. So as this points out, studies have shown that people living under systemic and society-wide racism and or encountering specific racially motivated actions actually have stress genes that are turned on that promote inflammation and makes them more susceptible to illness. So racism is therefore associated with chronic low-grade inflammation that leads to elevations in stress hormones that exacerbate a number of diseases. Stress induced by racism has been shown to shorten telomeres. Telomeres are the stretches of DNA at the end of our chromosome, which determine how resistant we are to disease and how long we live. The shorter our telomeres, the shorter our lifespan, the more susceptible we are to disease. Can you guys see this slide?
Yeah, that's great.
Yes.
Okay, fine.
Yes.
So because there are a couple of other important points that I want to make. Racism-induced stress has been shown to alter brain structure and brain chemistry. And that has also been shown to actually begin in utero. So they've looked at pregnant women who have undergone stressful, racially motivated incidents, and they've been able to document changes in the brain structure and chemistry of their babies. Pregnant women experiencing racial stress have a higher risk for giving birth to low birth weight babies and for premature delivery. And of course, that comes with a host of attendant problems. And so the net result is that a lifetime of racism and discrimination can lead to people having more chronic diseases and shortened lifespans. So this is one of the major reasons that people of color are primed to be more susceptible to disease, because their bodies are literally flooded with these stress hormones, and they have disease promoting genes that have been turned on by the chronic stressors that they have to deal with every single day. Then on top of that, people of color are frequently forced into areas that are food deserts. So they don't have access to the very kinds of foods that I was previously pointing out help boost and augment immune function. So they live in inner city areas where they don't have access to supermarkets selling fresh produce, vegetables, and so forth. They maybe because of monetary problems are forced to eat fast foods, which are high in fat, high in animal protein, very high in environmental toxins, which also have a deleterious effect on our immune function, but again, don't supply their bodies with the things that they need to have a properly functioning immune system. And so as a result, they're not only genetically primed to succumb to disease because of the constant stress, but then they don't have access to the foods that could actually boost and augment immune function. And also, because of suboptimal diets, we find that people of color are frequently carrying around more weight than they should. And obesity and being overweight in and of itself ramps up stress hormones like cortisol and so forth, and increases inflammation in the body, all of which decrease immune function and decrease the ability of our immune system to respond effectively to challenges like COVID. So I'm hoping that you're getting the picture now that because of what our society does to people of color, it puts them in a living situation where they don't have access to the best food, and then subjects them to society-wide stressors that actually activate disease-promoting genes and predisposes people of color to having poor outcomes across the board. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thanks, Dr. Mills. I think this lays out a lot of information for everybody, both about sort of the near-term effects of what we eat day to day, and also the long-term effects of racism. And what I'd love to hear from you is, do you have stories or observations from your practice of how you've seen disparities come about during the COVID-19 pandemic, or things that we might learn from in all of this?
Well, given that I do hospital-based medicine, the people that I see and treat with COVID are essentially the horse has already left the barn, in essence. So they come into the hospital. They are already diagnosed and dealing with the disease. And unfortunately, because of the way hospital medicine is practiced in the United States, it is it's difficult to try and institute the kinds of dietary and lifestyle interventions that I believe could be helpful for these patients. So what I have done is I have put several posts on my website and also my Facebook page recommending a number of supplements to individuals to help them be more resistant to this disease, and or if they're fighting it, to help them hopefully get over it. And also emphasizing the importance of plant-based diets to help us be resistant to these kinds of health problems. You know, just that I do believe that converting to a plant-based diet and taking a number of specific supplements can really help with this. So I don't have specific examples of, say someone who came into the hospital with coronavirus and started on the supplements I recommended and gotten over that just because of the way the medicine is practiced in the hospital. However, I do know a number of other individuals, as Rachel Atchison was mentioning, with autoimmune diseases, diabetes, cancers, who have been able to cure themselves of very advanced, very serious illnesses by adopting a plant-based diet.
Excellent. And can you tell us, just for those who are newer to plant-based nutrition, what is it about conditions like diabetes and hypertension in particular that seem to make people, have greater risk here? And what's nutrition got to do with that?
Sure. So there is no question that the majority of chronic disease that we see in Western countries, including the United States, come about as a direct result of consuming an animal food-based diet, because animal protein, animal fat, the hormones that are found in dairy products all promote diseases like diabetes. I mean, you can even argue that an animal food-centered diet causes hypertension, because we know that there have been a number of studies that have looked at changing people from a standard Western type diet that's high in animal fat, animal protein, dairy products, to a plant-based diet, and has shown that the regression of their hypertension. Dr. Esselstyn and he's going to shoot me because I'm blanking on his Dean Ornish from the University of California, San Francisco, have both shown absolute regression of coronary artery blockages by putting people on a plant-based diet. I have a lecture where I feature 4 different people who were actually able to cure themselves of advanced cancers by adopting a plant-based diet. And again, the reason is that and the physiology and chemistry is somewhat involved, but animal protein, animal fat actually promote inflammation. They turn on cancer causing genes. They turn on genes that cause dysregulation of blood sugar metabolism. So for instance, we know that one of the primary reasons that people develop type 2 diabetes, which is adult onset diabetes, which is caused by insulin resistance, or that disease is made worse, is because of the accumulation of intracellular fat that interferes with the action of insulin on our cells. Well, that fat is due primarily to consuming saturated animal fat, and the types of amino acids that are more prevalent in animal proteins, which in and of themselves are metabolized down what are called ketotic pathways that promote the accumulation of intracellular fat. And that when people then change from that animal food centered diet to a plant-based diet, they suddenly are no longer driving the genes that promote disease development, but there are a number of compounds within the plant foods themselves that make them more insulin sensitive, that help resolve the accumulation of intracellular fat, and that actually can reverse diabetes. There's a very big study that came out earlier this year, I believe it was from Ukraine, where they took people and put them on people with diabetes, type 2 diabetes, put them on a plant-based diet and showed resolution of the diabetes in 85% of the participants. I myself have several patients who have been able to come off all of their diabetes medications by adopting a fully plant-based diet. I've also seen this in people with autoimmune diseases. And as I said before, it's well documented that cardiovascular disease responds promptly to changes in diet. So these mechanisms are well established and well understood, and it behooves all of us, if we want to make ourselves resistant to not only infectious diseases, but also these chronic ailments that plague Americans, and particularly people of color, that we have to get back to a plant-based diet.
Can we pivot now? Let's move into talking a little bit about the dietary guidelines.
Sure.
That the USDA puts out every 5 years. So recently we've seen the U.S. Department of Agriculture and Department of Health and Human Services have a scientific advisory committee that have put together a report in advance of settling on the guidelines for the 2020 to 2025 period. And I know in the past, and you have testified in front of the committee with very strong statements about the racism that's inherent within U.S. nutrition policy. Can you give us the highlights? What are the main points that you have made in the past about the dietary guidelines and how nutrition policy is both developed and implemented in our country?
Okay. Well, one of the first things that I need to disabuse people of is the idea that the dietary guidelines are primarily about promoting healthy diets in Americans. Because when I was in residency and I first started working with the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, one of the very first projects that I worked on the organization with, was trying to submit position papers to the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee. And I started this project under the assumption that the U.S. Dietary Guidelines were the province of the Department of Health and Human Services. That is not true. When the Dietary Guidelines were first created in 1980, they were put out by the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And the USDA has as its primary directive from Congress to increase the market for U.S. agricultural output. So from the very beginning, there was this tension and conflict between industry, lobbyists, and operatives who wanted the dietary guidelines to encourage Americans to consume the things that American agribusiness was producing, versus the people on the panel from the scientific side who were looking at the science, which all and consistently showed that the more animal foods people eat, the sicker they got, the shorter their lifespans. So the science-based individuals who were concerned with human health wanted to recommend that people eat less meat, less dairy, less fat, more plants and whole plants and whole grains. But if they were to recommend that, that means that people wouldn't be buying what agribusiness was producing. So again, you have this conflict. So that is, I mean, we have to really realize and recognize that, so that we can understand why the dietary guidelines are not as health promoting as they should be. And I would strongly urge anyone listening to this to see if they could pull up some of the meetings that have been put online, where the Dietary Guidelines Committee has people from industry, from health groups, who come to make recommendations to them, because you will be stunned and probably appalled when you see people from the candy industry talking about the benefits of eating, pure sugar. And there are people from the liquor industry talking about the why we should promote consumption of hard alcohol and beer. it's, you know, there are people who will do and say anything for money, and you see that on full display at these committees. But so one of the biggest components of U.S. agribusiness has been the dairy industry and its attendant lobby. And they successfully lobbied from the very beginning to have dairy products. And I specifically say dairy products, not dairy foods, because they're not food, they're products. Dairy products included as an alleged food group. That is one of the most unscientific and, from a health standpoint, deleterious aspects of the dietary guidelines, because there is absolutely no human need for mammary secretions or products made for them from another species. Dairy products are actually, in some ways, some of the most unnatural things that are commonly consumed in Western countries. Nowhere in nature do you find any mammal consuming the mammary secretions of another species. That's outrageous. Milk is designed by Mother Nature, God, whomever you choose to attribute it to be a species-specific growth enhancement fluid for infants. When you look at mammals in nature, none of them consume even their own milk after they are weaned, because milk is specifically designed to make infants grow and to stimulate their immune systems to mature. Once they are past infancy and they have a functioning immune system, then they adopt their usual diet. Well, one of the main problems with consumption of dairy products is that dairy products contain a sugar called lactose, which is the sugar that is found in the milks of mammals. In order to absorb lactose, you have to make an enzyme called lactase that splits this two sugar molecule into individual sugars so that you can absorb it. Well, 65% of the people on this planet stop making lactase once they are no longer infants. And it makes sense because biologically, manufacturing complex enzymes is an energy intensive process. And once you no longer need that enzyme, it does not make sense to continue making it. So most humans on the planet and most mammals on this planet stop making lactase once they are weaned from their mother's breast. It turned out that over the last 6,000 years in Northern European countries and a few East African societies, people started using cow's milk and the milk from sheep and goats as a way of having extra calories to get them through the winter or through lean times. And over a period of thousands of years, within those populations, they selected for individuals who continued to make the enzyme lactase throughout their lifetime. So the end result of all that is that when you look at American society, most people of color come from societies where dairy products are not consumed, and therefore the majority of them are lactase deficient, and therefore they are lactose intolerant, meaning that if they consume foods that have lactose in it, like dairy products, they will become sick. They will become acutely ill. And it turns out within the United States, 75% of African Americans, 74% of Native Americans, 95% of Asian Americans, and 53% of Hispanic Americans are lactose intolerant, meaning when they consume lactose-containing problems, they will become sick. They will get gas, bloating, cramping, and diarrhea, and possibly even more severe disease like abdominal pain, allergic type reactions. Children can actually develop intestinal bleeding that can cause anemia and other problems. Whereas only 30% of Caucasian Americans are lactose intolerant because of, again, the high prevalence of the use of dairy products in European countries. Well, what is the reason that the dairy industry says that we should be sucking on the teats of a cow? They claim that it's for the calcium, that dairy products have calcium, you need calcium to build strong bones, therefore you should consume dairy products. Well, the research doesn't support that. All of the research has shown that dairy calcium does not build strong bones. It does not prevent osteoporosis. In fact, it shows that in societies where the consumption of dairy products are common, they have the highest rates of osteoporosis and hip fracture. Harvard Nurses Health Study showed that the women who consumed the most milk had the highest rates of hip fracture. Again, as I said, when you look worldwide, consumption of dairy products actually correlates with the prevalence of osteoporosis and weak bones. The more dairy products a country consumes, the higher their rates and prevalence of lactose intolerance. Well, when it comes to people of color, the U.S. government has known for over 100 years that not only are African Americans intolerant of lactose, but African American women are genetically protected against developing osteoporosis, period. So the primary reason given for the consumption of this product does not even apply to Black women. So Black women are being encouraged to consume products that are going to make them sick for no even theoretical benefit. Now, I want to emphasize, it doesn't benefit white women, or or any other group of women, but it's particularly egregious when you look at the fact that even the so-called theoretical benefit doesn't apply to women of color. And then we also know that the number one risk factor for the development of prostate cancer is the consumption of dairy products. And there are a number of reasons for that. It's because of the growth hormones in dairy foods, but it's also because of the hormones that are there. Cows have to be pregnant in order to give milk, and their milk is filled with estrogens and cortisol naturally. But in addition to that, because of the way cows are raised in the United States, they are given synthetic hormones starting at about 6 months of age and all the way through their lifespan until they go to slaughter, because it promotes rapid growth. It causes them to get larger than they normally would, and it also augments their milk production. So when someone is consuming dairy products, they are getting all of the hormones that that animal produces naturally, as well as a slew of synthetic hormones that these animals have been fed and treated with. And the end result is that African American men have a 60% higher incidence of prostate cancer than white men. Moreover, once an African American male develops prostate cancer, we are more than twice as likely to die from it because we get much more aggressive forms of this disease than Caucasian Americans. We know that Black, Hispanic, and Native American people are much more susceptible to developing type 2 diabetes, which has also been linked to the consumption of dairy products. And there's been a major study that came out recently that showed that, again, because of the hormone content of dairy products, women who consume as little as 1/4 of a cup of milk per day have a 30% higher risk of developing breast cancer. If they go up to 1 cup of milk a day, their risk for developing breast cancer increases to 50%. And if they drink 2 or more cups of milk a day, their risk of developing breast cancer increases by 80%. This is just off the charts. And again, when you look at breast cancer survival, it is lower for women of color relative to white women for a variety of reasons. And it includes both getting more anaplastic and aggressive forms of the disease, but also because of a limited access to quality medical care. These cancers are frequently diagnosed at later, less treatable stages in women of color relative to white women who have good health insurance, good access to care. Now, I just want to say parenthetically, the good news is there are a number of women who have been able to cure themselves of breast cancer by adopting a purely plant-based diet and eliminating all meat, eggs, sea animals, and dairy products from their diet, and adopting a healthy, balanced, whole food, plant-based diet. But that's a topic for another lecture.
Excellent. This is just tremendous. The data and what you're able to draw here about specifically Black communities. And I'm wondering, we want to pivot into questions very soon.
Sure.
Can you tell us beyond dairy specifically, and beyond making sure that all people have access to produce that will give them the fruits and vegetables they need for all the antioxidants and nutrients that you mentioned before, what other aspects of our nutrition policy nationally are contributing to structural racism? Are there other things? And the secondary question to that is, what can we do as community members in our various positions to be supportive of change for the liberation of Black and brown bodies?
Sure. So, that is a complex question, but one of the, again, biggest structural problems when it comes to diet is the fact that people of color are often confined to areas where they don't have access to healthy, nutritious food that includes fresh produce, fruits, and whole grains. They frequently live in what are called food deserts, which is defined as an area where the nearest supermarket that provides fresh and whole produce is more than 10 miles away. And that is effectively a giant moat for people confined to the inner cities, because many of them don't have their own vehicles. Public transportation is spotty or questionable, and therefore they aren't able to cover the distances that they would need to cover to try and get these foods and bring them home. Many of them are living in shelters or places where they don't have the ability to store or keep or even prepare fresh foods and produce. So one of the things that we need to do is looking at how we can rectify that. So, no one can necessarily tell Safeway, you have to build a store, in the middle of Watts. But what we can do is make it easier to set up temporary farmers markets in these areas that don't have readily available supermarkets, so that we can say Tuesdays and Thursdays, an area of this neighborhood will be cordoned off so that farmers can come in and bring in their produce and make it available to the residents there. We can insist that the SNAP program is changed so that SNAP dollars can be used at farmers markets to purchase fresh foods and produce. Also, it has been recommended, and I think certain states have already implemented the program whereby if you spend your SNAP dollars on, again, fresh fruits, vegetables, and produce, $1 will be worth half again as much. So instead of $1, it'll be worth $1.50 or more when purchasing these healthier food alternatives. And I like that system because it doesn't penalize or punish people for buying the occasional soda pop or bag of potato chips, but it does provide an incentive for them to buy healthier foods. We need to lobby Congress to take out provisions in the Farm Bill that encourages the production of not only animal foods, but commodity crops like, white rice, sugar, and so forth, that are not health promoting, and instead put in provisions that encourage higher production of healthier foods. We need to remove subsidies, for fast food concerns, because everybody knows you drive through the inner city and it's like Murderer's Row. There's Popeyes, there's KFC, there's Burger King, Wendy's, McDonald's. All of these restaurants are targeted to inner city areas, whereas you move out to the suburbs and you don't see them. Well, one of the reasons they are targeted to the inner cities is because their products are heavily subsidized by the government, so that the things that they sell are artificially cheap. A cheeseburger, if it was sold at market rate, meaning that it truly reflected the cost of production, would be about $10 a pop. But because of governmental subsidies, McDonald's and Burger King and the rest of them are able to sell this food like cheeseburgers for $1, $1.50. That needs to stop. We need to stop subsidizing the production of ill health. We need to stop targeting these restaurants to vulnerable communities, and instead put in policies that make healthier foods not only available but affordable for the residents there. And then, of course, we have to do everything we can to help spread the educational information that we have about the benefits of plant-based eating and how to cook and prepare plant-based foods so that they are attractive and desirable to people. Because the bottom line is this, that nobody wants to live on granola and celery sticks. I don't. But if food is delicious and it's satisfying, then who does not want that? Everybody will eat something that tastes good and that is good for them. So that's where we have to put our emphasis and focus, and essentially be the change that we want to see.
Thanks, Dr. Mills. A great way to wrap up this segment. What I want to do now is to turn it over to Minister John Williams to ask our first questions, and then we'll take a few from the crowd before we close tonight. So Minister John Williams, are you here?
He's muted. Tell him to turn on his mic.
Okay. Here we go.
I was muted. Are you hearing me now?
Yes, sir.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Doctor, it's a pleasure. This was long needed, and you need to come out more. I don't know where you've been hiding. It looked like you. It looked like you were on the beach there. You're in another.
Let me say, for purposes of clarity, that's an artificial background because my room is a disaster. Yeah, no, I wish I were on the beach, but no, I'm stuck here in Northern Virginia.
So I have to pressing questions. Diabetes is our main focus
Sure.
because it's one of the conditions that affect the entire body, all of the organs,
Absolutely.
as you said.
Absolutely.
And it's devastating, particularly in central Brooklyn. And so with our task force, we are so privileged to have SUNY and all the other partners, the Borough President's Office on board to get this information out. Now, when it comes to the dairy lobby and the sugar lobby,
Mm-hmm.
They are effective in their work. Obviously,
absolutely.
They are very, very effective. But you talked about the armed forces. And when it comes to the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and all of that, when you enter into a battle, you have to study the enemy, and you know the enemy, and you have to have a strategy and a structure to really do it. So we who are the people, we are the consumers. We are out here, whether it's the dairy or the sugar, whoever it is, without us, they're not going anywhere. Right. How can we organize? Like, for instance, you talk about your clinical approach to medicine, your clinical, and it's not that effective because it's in there. You have so many obstacles and stuff like that.
Sure.
How can you come out and be a part, like in, for instance, the church-based preventive health centers initiative? Because in any change that happened in this country, it was always the faith-based community institution
that's absolutely
played a major part in that. And so you need to duplicate your efforts in yourself. For me, with Sarah and Elizabeth and Liana and all of them, we need to duplicate and really expand this thing so that we can start our own lobby. How could we do that?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the faith-based initiatives, because one of my dreams and goals, and something that prior to COVID sort of making its presence known, that I had been talking with a number of prominent individuals within the plant-based movement about, was organizing a plant-based conference specifically directed at communities of faith. Because, as you say, those are some of the major drivers of knowledge and just lifestyle practices within our communities. And it just breaks my heart when I go to church or go to visit other churches, and before we can even get worship service started, you've got to hear, oh, we need to pray for Sister So-and-so. She had a stroke. We need to pray for Brother, Smith, because he's in the hospital with a heart attack. All of these things that are unnecessary and could be prevented. And what I love about the Christian, or I should say the Judeo-Christian based faiths, is that it's an easy lift for them, because if they say they believe God and they believe his word, well, what did he tell us to eat right up front? He told us to be plant-based. And it's the departure from that advice that creates disease. And science has proven that. So I feel that as faith-based people, we have a special burden to look at what we are doing to our bodies, which we say we believe are God's temple, and asking ourselves, are we living within the guidelines that he gave us for health? And the answer is, quite frankly, no. But that if we are willing to adopt those lifestyle changes, it would go a long way towards reversing and preventing the development of these diseases, particularly diabetes. You give me a type 2 diabetic, if they are willing to commit to a plant-based diet, I will have them off their medicines within 12 weeks. It's really that direct. And so, yeah, we need to make people understand that instead of being sick and slowly falling apart and suffering all of these health complications, that they can change their diet and really reverse this disease and improve their health. And believe me, I had, I think, 11 programs that I was scheduled to do just between February and June of this year that all got canceled. And Liana can speak to that because of the coronavirus. So, no, I am fully committed to getting out into the community to spread this word and to help people realize that there is a much better pathway for us to walk down, one that is filled with health, wellness, decreased illness and disease, because, we can't say Black Lives Matter until we say and know that Black health matters.
Yes, sir.
Because it's not much of a life when you're sick and dying. So we've got to start that process with improving our health so that we can then go on and tackle these other issues.
All right. So the other question, basically, we wanted to get an idea specifically what it is about diabetes that makes a COVID, a person susceptible to hospitalization and death and all of that. That specifically is going on.
Okay. Number one, as you said, diabetes is a systemic illness. It's something that affects the entire body. So one analogy I learned when I was in medical school is that your immune cells, your white blood cells, are your police force, and they should be circulating your body, looking for bad actors, catching them in the act, and basically destroying them. But imagine that you had a city with a police force, but instead of the policemen circulating through the city, suppressing crime, looking for people committing crimes, they all went out drinking while they were on the job. Obviously, crime would be running rampant in that city. Well, sugar is such a volatile compound within the body that our bodies struggle to keep blood sugar tightly regulated. And when we eat things that cause our blood sugar to spike, the body starts dumping out insulin, but insulin goes to every single cell and tells that cell, stop whatever you're doing and start pulling in the sugar so we can bring the blood sugar level back to normal. Well, that also happens to our immune cells. So that when we get these big sugar spikes and we get insulin dumps into the system, instead of our white blood cells policing our bodies for infections, they start basically sitting there, scarfing up, absorbing sugar. And when they get full of the sugar, they don't function normally. They are the equivalent of a drunk cop. So they can't do their jobs well. So people with diabetes, therefore, have immune cells that not only are missing some of these vital cofactors I mentioned before, but they can't even function because they're so full of sugar that they don't function normally. And that is one of the major reasons that people with diabetes are predisposed to major infections. And the other point I'd like to make is that we all know sugar is energy. And every living organism, including bacteria, fungi, and so forth, need energy. One of the big problems that diabetics have is they get these sores that won't heal, and that can lead to amputations. Well, one of the problems is bacteria multiply and double faster than the drugs that we use can kill them. And if they have sugar to feed off of, so if someone with uncontrolled diabetes gets an infection and their blood sugar is elevated, that's enough energy to allow the bacteria to multiply faster than either their immune cells or even antibiotics can kill them off. Moreover, they generally have problems with circulation so that their blood vessels are clogged and the immune cells can't even get to the site of infection. And that's why the infections just rage out of control, destroy tissue, and ultimately cause people to have to get amputations or end up with kidney failure or blindness from retinal damage.
Thank you very much, Doc. Leanna?
Thanks so much, Minister Williams and Dr. Mills. We're going to just quickly get into maybe 3 questions from the crowd. I know we're well beyond 8 o'clock now.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you so much. So we've had some great questions come in. I'm going to go to some of the maybe smaller ones first. Does lactose intolerance over time eventually lead to chronic disease, or is it a different mechanism that causes the chronic disease?
That's a wonderful question, because the fact is that, yes, lactose in and of itself has been shown to predispose to ovarian cancer and a number of other diseases. I also believe that lactose itself has an immunosuppressant effect on the body. Now, people might say, whoa, 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 Doc, what are you talking about? How is it, and why should consuming the sugar that's in a mother's milk decrease our immune function? Well, think of what a mother's milk is supposed to do for her baby. One of the most important components of mother's milk is the transmission of maternal antibodies to the baby so that the baby will get what's called passive immunity. So if it gets antibodies from its mother, then it is protected against diseases that the mother is already immune to. But in order for that baby to be able to tolerate what are really foreign proteins, its mother's antibodies, it's got to tell its immune system to step down a bit. And that's one of the things lactose does, so that it will allow the baby to absorb proteins and antibodies from the mother without reacting to them. And that's fine if you are a baby and you're getting actual antibodies from your mom. Cow antibodies don't help you. Okay? They do nothing for you. So you get the hit on your immune system from the lactose with no benefit whatsoever. And then again, over time, lactose consumption has been shown to lead to a number of diseases, including cancers. And some people also think that lactose is a risk factor for diabetes itself.
Amazing. Wow. For people who already have pre-existing conditions in which their doctors have given them some restricted diets, let's say people on dialysis who've had kidney transplants, maybe even diabetics trying to follow the ADA diet, can those patients successfully adopt a whole food plant-based diet, or do there need to be some kind of modification?
Sure. Number one, that's an excellent question and an important question. So that one of the things I'd like to point out is that African Americans are the leading community within the United States suffering from kidney dysfunction. Okay, we have more renal insufficiency than any other group within the United States. What's important about that is that research and studies and experience has shown that in someone with underfunctioning kidneys, if they convert to a plant-based diet, they will recover kidney function. People who were on their way to needing dialysis that converted to plant-based diets actually had enough recovery of kidney function that they did not need to go on to dialysis. So it is super important that we consider adopting a diet. Now, what is the problem with people already on dialysis? Well, one of the compounds that are in plant foods that our kidneys are responsible for getting rid of is something called phosphate or phosphorus. And phosphorus is a buffer, and it's found in high amounts in a variety of plant foods. And so what some kidney doctors will tell their patients is, well, now that your kidneys aren't able to get rid of this phosphorus, you have to limit the amount of plant foods that you eat. But that's not true. Why is that not true? It's not true because all kidney patients are given phosphate binders, okay? And the phosphate binders basically bind phosphate in the digestive tract so that it's not absorbed. The only thing someone on dialysis needs to be concerned about is that they are eating the same amount of plant foods continually. Because when you do that, so let's say that your diet is, you go from 30% plant foods to 90% of your diet is made up of plant foods, or preferably 100%. Well, then all your doctor has to do is adjust the amount of phosphate binders you're taking to match the amount of plant foods that you're eating. And as long as you're eating the same amounts on an ongoing basis, then you'll reach a steady state and you don't have to worry about that. That's also true for people who are on Coumadin, because we know that plant foods can counteract Coumadin, which is a blood thinner. And again, doctors sometimes tell patients, well, now that you're on Coumadin, you can't eat these green plants as much because they'll interfere with the action of Coumadin. No, that's not true. It just means that you have to eat the same amount on a regular basis, because then they adjust your Coumadin dose to account for the amount of plant foods that you're eating. So even people with these diseases can go on a plant-based diet, and it's beneficial for them to do that because it will help avoid heart disease. As I said, if they have renal insufficiency, it'll help them from progressing to complete kidney failure and may even help them recover kidney function. We already heard about how Representative or Councilman Eric was able to recover his eyesight by adopting a plant-based diet. There are amazing benefits from being plant-based, and it's good for everyone.
Excellent. Absolutely. Let's step back. Just one more question on COVID. Have you seen people who follow a pretty healthy plant-based diet getting COVID and seeing, the bad implications of it in the same way that we see in the general population?
So I'm going to say, the short answer is no, but I've got to put an asterisk by that. And the asterisk is that, of course, what I see is anecdotal. I'm not seeing everybody that's out there. However, I have specifically posed that question on my social media pages about COVID in plant-based individuals. And from the feedback that I have gotten, it does look like individuals who are plant-based are more resistant to the virus because most of them are not coming down with it. But again, like I said, that's not a representative sample. But even in those few individuals who said, yeah, I'm vegan, but I did get it, they tend to have a milder course and recover much more quickly without long-term ongoing problems. So I would say that from my experience, there is clear benefit with respect to COVID for being plant-based. It does make you resistant. However, it's like seatbelts and airbags. Just because you're wearing a seatbelt and you're driving a car with airbags does not mean that you get drunk and get on the freeway and drive 100 miles an hour. Because if you're reckless, you're going to kill yourself. So even when you are plant-based, we still need to wear our masks. We still need to observe the rules about social distancing.
Thank you. Excellent. I want to say we're going to wrap up right now, but everything you've laid out for us from COVID to the dietary guidelines and other structural issues has been really tremendous. And it's just so important to bring these issues up. So I thank you so much for your leadership in the field, for your leadership by the beach, let's say. And I want to invite everybody who's newer to this conversation to really think about how can we extend this message and make sure that Black and brown people in particular are hearing it and understanding the importance of it, and also feeling that they're going to find support from their compatriots in the field, you, Dr. Mills, and many others who are leading the way in the field of plant-based nutrition, who are folks of color. And I want to highlight something you said before, that we can't say Black Lives Matter without Black Health Matters.
Absolutely.
So, and for me, as an ally, as somebody from the white community who wants to stand, right next to you and say, let's do this, let's make change together. I know that talking about health is one of those things that's going to bring us down a very different path. And hopefully we'll all find greater health together. So thank you so much, Dr. Mills.
Can I make I want to make people aware of resources that are available. So first, I want to direct people to my website. Then the name for the website is a little long. It's Dr. Milton Mills PlantBasedNation.com. So that's Dr. Milton Mills PlantBasedNation.com. And I have all sorts of materials, lectures, posts that people will find useful. And they can also go to YouTube and type in my name, Dr. Milton Mills, and a whole slew of lectures will come up, including Are Humans Designed to Eat Meat? Chemistry for Understanding Nutrition, focusing on protein, and a number of other important lectures that will give people the tools and information they need to facilitate change in their lives.
Excellent. Thank you. And we put that up on the chat box for everybody. We'll also be sending an email afterwards with links and other resources that many folks have shared over the course of the program in the chat box. Thanks to everybody who's been having these side conversations as we've been discussing the topics with Dr. Mills. I also wanted to highlight that Plant Powered Metro New York, we have ongoing web programs which are designed not just to help people get exposure to these ideas and to the evidence behind whole food plant-based nutrition, but also how do you start on the path of this lifestyle? How do you maintain a lifestyle that's very different from what everybody else around us is doing? We've got culinary demonstrations and a lot of other kinds of things going on. So you can check that out at the link I just shared in the chat box. You can contact me. And I just want to thank, in particular, all of our partners who are at the table. It takes a village, and it certainly takes a network like ours to get this message out there. And Minister Williams will talk about approaching the faith-based communities and making something happen in a big way. Brooklyn Borough President Adams' office is taking leadership on so many different levels, and the SUNY Downstate Committee and others. You know, it takes all of our work together, and I really invite any of you who feel empowered by this knowledge and passionate about it to step forward and work with us, work with these partners to make something happen in our local community, because change needs to happen now. This is the time. So with that, I want to thank you, Dr. Mills, for being with us again, and wish all of you a good evening. We'll be posting this recording of the program on our YouTube channel, and you'll find it on Facebook as well. And further details will follow. But everyone have a wonderful night. Take care.